So hi, Susan. Thank you for joining us today. The first question I have for you, so you told us about this first meeting in Montreal, where I'm based, where this transboundary network was born. Can you share a little bit more detail as to which of the global water issues you were working on that got the people together and where they connected? Because it's interesting to hear what are the very sort of potentially daily issues that they're facing that they feel they can address together.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. So one of the things I want to bring up first is that from the very beginning, and of course, this was all email, right? Even at this point, we hadn't gone into the pandemic and we weren't on Zoom. And so a lot of the connections, because it was Pakistan and Afghanistan, and I had been in contact and had read a really interesting study on the challenges of the Indus River Basin that had been an EU, European Union study that was with a group of, and I'm sorry, I can't bring it up right now, but it was a really, very interesting and prominent group in Afghanistan that was doing a study on water. So they had already been identifying some challenges, which had to do with upstream, downstream on the Kabul River, dams, dams wanting to be built, dams that were there, already starting with, terrible flooding in Pakistan, right, due to climate change. So they were facing already then challenges. So there was a context because of that study that had been done for the people who were coming to the group. But this is why I'm bringing up the email. We really made from the very beginning a focus and a commitment to relationships. It was really all about like getting to know each other, getting to know the specific challenges because of how complex things are. And there were really different people. We had everything from a deputy minister of the environment in Afghanistan to literally people on the ground to people in Canada who were diaspora, right? Pakistanis and Afghans. So they had very different interests coming to the group. And I think they were kind of quizzical, thinking, what were they going to encounter? So I felt like the first thing that both Asim and I did, like we took everybody out to dinner. We really made an effort to try to get to know everyone. And that really, I've seen this now over the 5 years, it makes a huge difference that we're not like one size fits all. Everybody has very different kinds of challenges. But what really came, and so there, I would say a couple things to really specifically answer your question. One was a kind of, I would almost say sadness or, question of whether because of living with conflict and living with it for so long, can you get people together and actually discuss things that you might have in common? And what really they found they had in common was, yes, we all need clean water. We all need to be able to share this. We're all facing climate change. And we need to figure out, because it's so complex, we can't work with the same ways of being in conflict that we have been, because the governments, they're very slow to change. And they have so many political and, so many pressures in so many directions that we just felt this has to start with people on the ground. And because we had upper level people there, they didn't feel they had to, even though they were careful and had to represent their positions, they felt like they were in a different kind of space where they could really talk openly and freely and figure out through this complexity lens, are there other things we haven't thought about? And so just the idea, I think this was why they wanted to form this network of networks, because it all of a sudden allowed them to say, wait a minute, here's a space that's maybe open to us that hasn't been there before. And even if it's about dialogue right now, we can get to the actual citizen science and this is where Asim came in, we can start to get to water sensors for people on the ground, right? To literally be able to like check on their water sources. So all of those practical things can come, but finally the relationships have to be built first.
Wonderful. If you still have a few minutes, I'd like to share the number of partners that are in the network, and maybe you can speak to some of them. So this is on the Who We Are page, which I'm sharing in the chat for everybody to take a look themselves if they want to.
Thank you.
And maybe you can speak a little bit about some of them.
Absolutely. And this is actually, we really need to update this. There's actually many more now in, because of Asim's work in the Indus River Basin, right? There's now many more. You see COAR, which is a community organization on the ground in the Indus River Basin. There are many partners now, particularly in the Indus River Basin, but Asim now last year had a Fulbright grant and was able to go visit with partners on the Amazon River. And so I believe this one is listed here, but now again, there are many more now that he's been in contact with on the Amazon River. And then the Mekong River, we also, and I saw that, I believe today you have people coming in speaking about the Mekong, which
That's correct.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in hearing, because I don't think, they're not the people we've been in touch with. So this is why I get excited, Frederick, about what you're doing, because you're assembling even a larger network of people. I think that between all of us, and I personally don't have any, stake in having Twin be the overall organization of this. I feel like we just all need to kind of combine, connect from whatever our different perspectives are, and just grow this to the point where hopefully we have every NGO, every community organization working together in all these river basins to move forward. So, we've, Asim is also, they've done a lot of work on the Lake Champlain area in the United States, and the Jordan River, as you're going to hear from Clive and his team. We've been in touch with them for quite a long time, really from the very beginning. And I should have said that because of my connections to them in that very first meeting at the Bennington College, they also came to Montreal.
And this is how we're connected, because of peace engineering. One of our colleagues, Mira Olson, put me in touch with Clive, who put me in touch with you. So we're always 1 degree from each other, which is exciting, because these are massive issues that we're trying to tackle from bottom up and top down at the same time. And I revert back to my comment earlier on the triple helix, where if we're consistent and we're able to convene at every single junction point, the academic research, the civil society organizations on the ground, and the political leadership, that's the only way that we can accelerate. And more often than not, I've been involved in politics a very long time. They are much more accessible and open than people think. They're also able to listen much more than we think. They have tough jobs. We need to recognize that they have tough jobs, especially now where we're going into a situation. I'll share some of it before the top of the hour. We're going into water stress like we've never seen. It's been estimated this week by Johan Rockstrom and his colleague Mariana Mazzucato that we're going into 2030, 82 months away, 40% of demand will outstrip supply. We will be in a topsy-turvy world before we know it. We already are in a topsy-turvy world when it comes to how folks in the South Asian continent, particularly the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, access water. I don't think people in the West or the global North realize the very comfortable situation that they're in, where they just open a contraption that's called a faucet and then water flows. That is not the case right now in a lot of the areas of the world. Getting water, getting clean water is a very intricate process, much more than people realize. And we've been lulled into this complacency in the North, especially, that, you know, water will flow, whatever happens. Well, it's not really the case. And if you allow, I'm going to share some data that speaks to this, because I think it's interesting for folks who are with us today to see them. So you should see my screen, and I want to share some data points. So what's exciting is that water is the ultimate cooperative mechanism, because 150 countries out of the close to 200 recognized countries share transboundary rivers, lakes, or aquifers. The UN Water Conventions, plural, are the way to create this transboundary cooperation, which must be done because we're faced with these massive disruptions to the water cycles, plural, and also our access. 35% of treated water lost in urban water systems. Even in my city of Montreal, we've had to replace 100-plus-year-old wooden pipes. I kid you not, we had wooden pipes until very recently. So all of the effort that goes into getting the water to us was being lost. So we absolutely need to spend what must be spent to make people water resilience. So this is the article I was referring to, where demand is going to outstrip supply by 40% by 2030. 2030 is tomorrow. It's 82 months away. These data points should accelerate action, and this is why we're convening this conference online today. Now, this is two very interesting quotes from the co-chairs of this Global Commission on the Economics of Water. Johan Rockström, if you're not familiar with him, he's one of the leading scientists trying to scream, because that's what he does, at every microphone that he can, that, you know, we must get into acceleration of action. And when he says that every additional 1 degree Celsius of warming adds 7% moisture to the cycle, it's going to, as he says, lead to more and more extreme weather events. We've had situations of flooding in the South Asian continent, in Pakistan, that hadn't been seen in years. The last of that scale was in the late 70s in Bangladesh. People have forgotten, but there are hundreds of millions of people whose lives were upended because of this. So as Johan Rockström says, water is a driver and a victim of climate. And Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala very ably says that we need to reduce water waste, improve efficiencies, and provide opportunities for water equity. The Himalayan glaciers melting put at risk the water resources for up to 1 billion humans. And already today, 600 million Indians face high to extreme water stress. There's a tech columnist blogger named Om Malik, O-M-A-M-A-L-I-K. I'll try and reference the exact post that he wrote about a couple years ago, where this is a fellow who's been living in the US for about 20, 25 years, and he was explaining very ably to his audience what it took for his family when he was a child growing up in India to get water. You had to go to the well. It took a couple of hours back and forth. Everything was in water bottles. This is how people are living in countless areas of the world, and we in the global north forget about this. Iran, everything that we see on Twitter, on TikTok, wherever they share it, these massive demonstrations that have been going on for months now, 6 months. What you rarely hear about is the underpinning of this situation is water. For years, the government, the central government, has been unable to address water shortages. The same in Syria. The Syrian war was propelled by water insecurity, which pushed rural citizens into the cities, which propelled the so-called Arab Spring. What people don't necessarily realize, this is from the Red Cross, after 10 plus years of war, the situation was dire, but we're faced there with 40% less drinking water. I don't think people realize what this means. Already they were in a dire situation. It's 40% less today. The US, 46 million people live with water insecurity. So I don't want to be a downer here. I just want to put the data out there for people to realize the situation is severe, but we can work together. This is what this event today is going to show. But I think people need to realize that 46 million people in the richest country in the world living under water stress, water insecurity means that, you know, something must be done. Investment must come. There is an estimate from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the American Water Works Association, that if we had to replace and repair the aging infrastructure, it would cost to the tune of $1 trillion. This is serious money that needs to be allocated, because we've heard and seen water stress in Jackson, Mississippi, in Flint, Michigan for years. This is actually much more prevalent. The media does a poor job of covering it, but it must be covered much more, especially with regards to the solutions out there. The Netherlands, we're going to speak about, because in a few minutes, I'm going to play a video message from The Hague Deputy Mayor Robert Van Asten. They've had to rejigger their entire agribusiness relative to its water use. We have acidification in the Arctic, which is creating a big issue relative to all of the ice melting in waterways that are basically disrupting all of the ocean cycles. And we had 2 major waterways last year under extreme stress that create potential issues relative to how they can be navigated. The Mississippi was almost declared in some areas as not safe for navigation. And this would create a major issue for the US. And the same was true in Europe for the Rhine River. Now, these are major waterways that serve as natural transportation networks that, if they shut down, things are not ideal, because we have to truck everything that is being put on the waterway. So there we go. I'm going to end there for this part. And since we still have a few minutes, if there are questions from the audience with us today, please do ask them in the chat. We have now 35 participants, including us, 31 attendees. Oh, I see a hand come up from Sherilyn. So Frank, maybe you can help me to see if we can.
Yeah, Sharon, you have the floor. Yeah, hi, thank you. I just wanted to know if planting trees would help a lot with the water situation in all these places.
It would, because trees being a natural part of the moisture cycle, we've seen studies, which I'll try and dig up, where our natural rainforests are instrumental in guaranteeing the flow of water. So yes, tree planting is always a good idea.
Yeah, may I ask another question?
Please.
Yeah, so I was actually traveling on a plane and I was watching my flight, and they were using Google Map, and I was horrified to see the state of the planet. I mean, the only ice cover was in Greenland and the Antarctic.
Yes.
And the state of the boreal forests in Canada, in Russia, was spotty and looked
Yes.
very unhealthy, and the Amazon looked just as bad. And obviously that's not the best way to find this out, but I mean, the alarm bells went on very loudly for me, and I was very saddened. And how can we get that information out to others?
So it's a very good point you make. The information is out there. Again, I'm trying to find people like everyone I've invited today, including Susan, who are focused on solutions. But let's not shy away from the fact that information is there, and the issue being the only way to halt, if not reverse, the adverse effects of climate change, particularly on the water issue, is to slow things down, which is a problem in a world that only works well with economic growth. So we need to redefine it. It's being talked about in much wider circles than before, which is where I draw hope. But let's be clear, we're talking about, if you pardon the analogy, we're about 120 miles on the highway, and we want to change our engine as the car is running. So it's difficult. It can be done, but it's very difficult. That's why we need to get the information out there, as you say.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Where are you connecting from, Sherilyn, and how did you get to us?
From Toronto, Canada.
Okay.
And obviously, as a Canadian, I feel we're not doing our part, and we should.
We're not.
And we're not. And it's you know, it's really sad how bad it has to get before we have change. And I'm concerned that that it will be irreversible. That's a lot of the damage has already been done.
A lot of it has been done. You're correct, but let's also draw hope from the fact that we can regenerate systems, we can regenerate our seas, we can regenerate our waterways. There was a time in the 60s when most of the Northeast rivers, including the St. Lawrence, where I live, were so polluted you couldn't see any forms of life in some ways. It is not the case anymore. Nature is much more resilient than we think. We just need to let it do its job more often than we do.
Agreed. Well put. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Sherilyn. We've also got a hand from Maita. So
all right.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, good afternoon from the Netherlands.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you for organizing again this very needed conference. I have a question for Susan, if I may. There's something that caught my ear. The network of networks creating an open space. And I was wondering, I've worked international, and then I've sometimes noticed that topics were politicized. And so I was wondering, Susan, this network of networks with the open space, is that the thing that was addressed to get away from the politicization of a shared common interest? Yeah, I see her nodding. So okay, I'm very interested in the techniques you used as a professional and a local activist. So maybe I could get in contact through another way with you later on.
Susan, you're still muted. You're still muted.
Thank you.
And thank you, Maita, for your question.
Sorry, Frederick. Yes, thank you so much for your question. And I would love to connect with you. Absolutely. You can find me at the Bennington College website, but also I can put my email in the chat. I'm happy to have anyone reach out to me about this, because I just couldn't emphasize more what you said. So thank you for bringing that up, because I really feel like these open spaces are the only way we're going to move forward. You know, I work a lot with improvisation, which can be very scary for people, because they really, it's not the absence of structure. It's the, I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm so glad I'm meeting you. So we'll contact, because finally I've met someone who's feeling and doing the same things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, this is why we convene these events. So thank you, Maita. I know you were at our event for COP15 in December. So thanks for coming back and participating. Very happy you're here. So Susan, I know you need to go because you have an event to attend. Let's see if there are still some questions while you're still with us, and then we will hear from Deputy Mayor Van Asten from The Hague. Any questions from anybody? All right, Mohammed is saying,
if I may, actually,
yes.
Frederick, Susan, I have a question for you. And, you know, from we've not met before, to the people watching, by the way, so lovely to meet you, Susan. And I was really impressed with your presentation and the organization and this concept of a network of networks. I manage the Global Greens, which is a network of the world's green parties and partner organizations. And water is one of those things that just completely unites us all, much in the same way the climate fight did and does as well too. And I think with that, it's got really a key enabling factor. We'll talk about the negative stuff very quickly, and then we'll move on, because we're all here to be solutions and go with that. But we know there are critical points. You know, Frederick, again, really wisely keeps talking about 2030 as being 18 months away, because that's really tangible. It's not a far off cloud in the distance. It's looming, it's tomorrow. And with that, something like water could be a critical juncture. Will it fuel conflict, or will it fuel cooperation? And these are the decisions that we, whether we know it or not, are making right now. And I think an organization and a network of networks such as yours is really crucial to enable it to be a mode of collaboration, a mode of cooperation. And I think some of the speakers we'll have later on will be discussing that too. And I know around the world, representing, you know, from Africa, Asia, throughout the Americas, Europe, etc., people want to unite around something. And I think water can be one of those things. I really appreciated Frederick's sharing the two quotes, Johan Rockström just talking about the climate change driver and victim. And then the second quote as well. Basically, it's really simple stuff in many ways. It's about accessibility and it's about good use. Just a quick story. I live in Italy, where we're about to head into a really, really big crisis with water, which the general public aren't really across in a significant way. It's a drought. But we're going to a second winter and a second spring with virtually zero rain. I mean, it's beautiful in one sense. It's particularly from the UK originally, but it's critical. This is also a country which has the highest consumption of water in Europe. That probably means the world. It's about 200 litres per person per day. The next average is 120. In Eastern Europe, they do 80. And it's not really discussed in a way. And then that's simple stuff. That's turning off taps. That's having a couple less showers. That's all that stuff is doable. But to come back to my point towards yourself, Susan, you said you deal with complexity and managing that complexity. I just wanted to give us some examples of what that looks like, because what we tend to do in these kind of movements is look for easy answers. And like for water, I was like, okay, you know, low-hanging fruit, good, quick solutions, but actually perhaps not shying away from that complexity is an important thing that we need to take on board as well. I just wondered if you had any thoughts to that at all.
Absolutely. I feel like looking at the local, regional, and global at the same time does not often happen. And it's being very specific about how they're all interconnected. And of course, everything is local to a certain extent, but because of, again, highlands to lowlands, water systems know no boundaries. They travel far distances. So the question is, at what scale, for any given problem or cooperation are you looking at? And being very specific about, so everything from, we were involved in drilling a well for a village in Burkina Faso, right, in West Africa, that had not had water, access to water easily. Women and children were walking miles to get water. And so that was a very specific, working with a very particular community. It was, we did the whole project for $22,000. They got fresh, clean water now for in the future, as far as we can tell. But it was a very specific local issue. That's very different from, like I was saying, Pakistan and Afghanistan, where you're talking about glacial melt, right? All the way from way up in the mountains, all the way down into the floodplains. So I think it's again, can you look at, and this is the complexity, the regional, the global, and the local, at the same time, in the ways that you need to understand what are the cooperation and partnerships that need to be addressed for those particular water systems, right? And that people understand how interconnected these water systems are. So, like, again, with now the issue in Italy, that would be a fascinating case study, right? To really see where in fact are the leverage points, right? The most important key places where you need to intervene. And you were talking about, scarcity and what individuals could do, but also would it involve other countries, right? Like, where is your water flowing from? Where is it going? So I think just that's what makes it actually really, really interesting. And I found that with the leaders actually in Jordan, Palestine, and Israel, where you would think, oh my God, that is literally impossible. And of course, Clive will talk more about this, but you'd be surprised at how much of a common interest there is in, right, resolving water issues. Yeah. So thanks for the question, Frank. And I'd be really interested to hear what happens in Italy, actually.
Yes, well, hopefully get some rain, to be honest. I mean, it's the agricultural aspect as well. It's the Po Valley, which runs from the Alps right through North Italy, where I'm based in Milan. And obviously, this is a food-loving country at the best of times, like most places are. But there's a large breadbasket there, so there's significant issues for that. And obviously, the personal use too. But we must connect, Susan. Obviously, I work with the Global Greens, and we've been working with people in Pakistan and elsewhere. And if I haven't plugged it before, I'm just going to plug it again. Behind me, you can see we have our Congress in Korea this year in June. We'll have water sessions too. So people at home watching, you are welcome to go to our website, sign up for the newsletter, and find out more information too. And Susan, I'd like to extend an invitation for participation there, and I'm sure there's much more we can do together as well. Thanks very much.
I agree, Frank. Thank you.
So Susan, you're welcome to leave us. I know you want to stay, but you have other things to get to. You can leave us at any time. I'm going to reference what Mohammed Awad shared in the chat, where he is concerned by what I was saying, and if the water issue has deteriorated up to this level, why don't we call for the UN to adopt an international convention? Well, this water conference that we're convening this event for is not a convention level yet, but it will be. So Susan, maybe you want to speak to that.
Well, this is the last thing, because I didn't mention this, but the reason I'm leaving is because I'm on my way to the United Nations with Asim. We've been actually asked by a CARD, it's the African Center for Climate Action and Rural Development, to participate with them. And they've been asked by the United Nations for us, we developed a concept note, which I can share with everyone, to actually move a new convention forward for the United Nations on saving literally the river deltas of the world. So we are literally been asked to participate to make this happen. And I extend an invitation to all of you. Frank, it would be great to connect with you. because this is another network of let's all come together for this convention to save the river deltas of the world. And it's not enough. Yes, the convention will help and it will help move, but we've seen other conventions before with the UN, and we know a lot more has to happen on the ground. So I'll stop there, Frederick, and thank you for mentioning that.
Of course. Can you spell the acronym so I can share it live?
Yes. ACCARD.
Yes.
And I can also share with you, send you an email as soon as I get off of the side of the event at the United Nations that is about moving this convention forward.
Okay, wonderful. I can't find it, but that's okay. We'll have time to reference it for everybody.
Okay.
All right. So looking at the Q&A, there is a question from Sherilyn. What I've noticed in Canada is that the mountains are vulnerable to mudslides because the ice cover is gone and the rain just destroys the mountains. Yes, that's correct. That's what happened in BC. That means that no more melting snow for rivers. Should mountain mining be stopped and fracking as well? Yes. But again, we're talking about disrupting entire economies. This is why we're convening these types of events where we're trying to deal with complexity and explain the interconnections and the interlocking systems that we are faced with. Things can be done, but again, it's complex, and I'll revert back to the triple helix. You need academia, you need political leadership, and you need civil society to connect and to work alongside each other. So, given that we spent so much great time with Susan, I'm not going to play the mayor's message right now because, by Susan, we're a couple of minutes from the start of our first session dealing with a specific geography, which is the Jordan River, where Clive Lipchin from the Arara Institute on the Israeli side and Monthar Hind on the Palestinian side will tell us more. And I just want to make sure that they're connecting. While that's being done, I'm going to end this recording so that I'll be able to post all the sessions without too much trouble. So I'm going to stop the recording now.